Who are joining us on KPRC 2+. Hopefully you were able to enjoy our previous program. I thought it was really insightful, a lot of information.
Great information.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but
new information too.
I was going to say new information, and to see what Lake Travis looks like now. I thought that was striking.
I watched his reaction when you were looking at some of that stuff. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, Lake Medina over in San Antonio is at 11% capacity. I can't even imagine what that looks like. 11%. I mean, it's basically not a lake anymore.
Yeah, right.
I was at an event a few weeks ago, and somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, don't we need a good tropical storm to kind of take care of this drought?" And I said, No. We just need about an inch or two every other day or so.
Right. If we got an inch of rain a week, that'd be 52 inches a year, which is average, which is what we need. And if you have a watering system, that's what they tell you to try to do. In the old days, remember the sprinklers that we all had?
Yeah.
And
I still have one.
You could put it, well, you could,
It's not working, but I still have one.
you know, with the old tuna fish cans, they're all in packets now, but they were tuna cans, and they're an inch tall. Yeah. So you put a tuna can out there on the sidewalk or in the yard, and when that tuna can was full, stop the water.
You're done. Right?
You know what? You're talking a different language than me, because I still have one of those things, and I still have tuna in cans too. I don't know where you've been.
You do not have tuna.
I do.
Then you're shopping Amazon, because I can't find them at the grocery store.
Hey, I want to talk to Judge Emmett here for a second, because although you are so well knowledgeable about so many different things, you could probably do a thing on tuna as well. But I want to talk to you about the Ike Dike, because that was something that has been talked about for many, many years during your period of time. And I know you were part of the process to try to get people to at least talk about this, talk about some options, because now we're the energy capital. Now we know how important that is. If something comes up, that Galveston Bay, we're in trouble. And there's still a long time before anything gets done.
That's the key. Yeah. It's a long time before anything gets done, because even though Congress has now acted and said we're going to fund it, there are some unanswered questions, like the gates that go over the ship channel. People talk about Rotterdam, but Rotterdam has rock to fasten their gates in. Galveston has mud, so it's not the same. And depending on how you design those gates, is it going to impede the traffic, the ship traffic? The other thing about Rotterdam that people don't really understand, that the gates, the port itself is outside the gate. So the gates don't really protect the port, they're to protect the city. So that's one question. But beyond the design, how do you pay for it? Yeah, Congress said we're going to give you this amount of money, but it's got to be a local match. And the legislature created a special district to raise the money. But guess what? The voters sometime are going to have to approve the taxes. So you're going to be asking people in Katy and Tomball to raise their taxes for something that's going to be in Galveston.
Is it a county thing?
It's several counties involved.
Okay, it's county, not statewide.
Not statewide.
But the different counties have to say, okay, we'll raise our taxes to build an Ike Dike.
Right.
Which has design flaws.
Which has, well, I won't say flaws, it just hadn't been
figured out,
completely designed yet.
Right.
And as I mentioned, I think earlier in private conversation, where do you put the wall? Everybody talks about the gates, but if you talk about the whole dike, do you put it onshore? Do you put it offshore? And
well, there's been talk of a seawall like what Galveston has all along Bolivar, and then continuing all the way down to the west end, and then putting more of those gates down at San Luis Pass.
Right.
But you're talking about blocking the views of everybody on Jamaica Beach and everybody on Pirates and everybody.
Unless you put
they're not going to like that.
Unless you put the wall on the highway that runs to the end of the west end, in which case anybody on the water side is just out of luck when a storm comes. But mentioning San Luis Pass, for those of us who remember, if Ike had gone over San Luis Pass, we'd have had thousands of people dead.
Yeah,
I mean, it went just east of there. And so you got to do something about San Luis Pass too. There are just a lot of unanswered questions. And you mentioned industry. When was the last time you heard an industry leader come out and say, we really need this and we're going to help fund it?
Well, they have their own meteorologist teams. I know that. So,
they do.
I mean, if they see something coming, they shut down, which takes a day or two. You can't just flip a switch on an oil refinery. But they know how to bring them down and bring them back up safely. But that's a very good point.
And that's very different than being ready for a hurricane that might be coming up the bay that's going to take them out, as opposed to shutting them down. As a whole, and plus the quote leaders of those companies, we know now that the people who are the shareholders are actually behind the scenes running what's going on. Gas prices, one example, that I'm talking about. They don't want to lower gas prices if the stockholders are saying no.
You're really getting us off the subject of
You brought up about industry leaders. I'm just going about those industry
So here's my question for you then. Is it going to happen? Because I'm listening to this conversation, and it's the same conversation we had in 2008 where everyone's like, we got to do this.
Tease us with this?
Yes.
We're going to fund the Ike Dike, but you know what? We're never going to build it.
Right.
It is a long way off. I mean, in my opinion, it's a long way off. If ever, but there are just too many unanswered questions. And when you get to the very end, even if you get it all designed, the voters are going to have to say, yeah, I'm willing to raise my taxes.
That's the issue.
For something that's in the next county.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you, judges. How do you get the voters, let's use Tomball, for example, because I think that's a great example. How do you get someone that's so far inland that they may not go to Galveston maybe once a year, right? Or you get someone that's way out in Katy that says, oh yeah, I know someone that lives there, but I haven't been there in 6 months, right? So it's kind of like the whole thing of, if my kids don't go to this school anymore, why should I fund this school for this bond levy or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, but
so how do you get people involved in
well,
that?
Canberra, you mentioned statewide. So if it's to protect the industry and the economy of the state, then why should it just be Harris County and the surrounding counties? Why shouldn't the state fund it?
Right.
With their rainy day fund, for example.
Yep.
You and I have been talking about doing something with the Astrodome for 20 years. It's still sitting there.
You just had to bring that up.
I mean, I have my ideas, nobody listens. But, you know, that would be even a hard sell.
Speaking of getting off
I mean, didn't we have one stadium on the ballot?
It was a hard sell, isn't it?
Yeah, the stadium, one of the stadiums that wasn't approved, so they put it back on until they keep putting it on until it is approved. So there's that too. I mean, there's a will, there's a way.
Well, we'll keep an eye on it. Obviously, Senator Cornyn was on Newsmakers a few weeks ago. That's a commercial. Said that they had at least made the first step, and so that's a positive thing. We have things ready to go. We have some questions that you did a really great job of sending in questions. Eric from Greater Houston area was asking about the idea of cloud seeding. Wants to know if it's ever going to become viable as a method of generating rain. We're talking about the drought now, and you know, what are the pros and cons? He asked about trying to launch silver iodine into the atmosphere. It's going on, but there are different reasons for why it may not be going on.
Going from one political question to another political question. How about cloud seeding? Because the issue with cloud seeding, yes, it works, but there's the whole politics of it. And Frank got into this in one of his blogs. Is if you cloud seed and one area gets a whole bunch of rain, you have those neighboring cities. If maybe it had nothing to do with the cloud seeding, if they don't get rain, all of a sudden it becomes an issue. Hey, you're stealing our rain, and that's because of cloud seeding, and it becomes political.
Well, it works. I mean, they're using it in parts of the Middle East, and it works. I mean, you could create rain. I know there was a case that one airport kept having fog, and so they decided to let's seed this so that we create rain to get rid of the fog. Okay, they created a lot of hail, which damaged a lot of cars. And now everybody wants to say, well, who's responsible for that?
Right.
and the other thing is sometimes it's not the cloud seeding that's the issue. Sometimes you just get hailstorms, but the correlation when it's there.
Right. It's like, why can't we redirect a hurricane?
Right.
Okay, we do that and we send it to Cuba. They're going to want to know why we redirected the hurricane from Florida to Cuba. Yeah. You know, then it's an international crisis. Yeah. Or why did you send it to Texas instead of Alabama? You know, so messing with Mother Nature too much is sometimes dangerous.
Well, I know that the seeding process works better in snow conditions than it does in not snow conditions, but they also said the rain that you can get from it can only get increased by about 10% when you do the seeding. So, but they want you to do it. The ones who've done it successfully have just done it regularly.
Well, they did it in the Middle East, and I did blog about this, and they had floods, and people died. So then you do that.
Right.
You create so much rain. Now, look, in a desert, 4 inches of rain is a whole year's worth of rain, right?
We saw that in Death Valley.
Right. You get 4 inches of rain, you're in trouble. Right. So you do this, and you think, well, we're just going to create 2 or 3 inches of rain. Well, that's 6 or 7 months worth of rain. So now they have no drainage for it, so they flood like they do in Las Vegas, and now people don't know how to handle it. And we say turn around, don't drown. Right. And they don't know how to handle it, and now people have died because you've tried to bring rain to the area. Then who's responsible for that?
Well, and the other issue I think with that too, piggybacking off of that, and you'd mentioned this before, Judge, talking about upstream versus downstream. You know, let's use what happened in Kentucky last week. Right. If you've been out in eastern Kentucky and southwest Virginia, those valleys are about this tight. And so if the cloud seeding's happening upstream, Well, what happens to those villages? I mean, they're tiny little towns there. You know, these coal towns that are downstream. What do they do? You know, do they have to build dikes every single one? And then it's just a question of, you know, if you can't control the output, then does that make it worthwhile at that point, right? You say, oh, well, I only want an inch out of that cloud. Well, clouds kind of do what clouds do.
Yeah.
We've all sort of figured that out after a while. The weather Frankenstein doesn't always behave itself. So,
but we're still, I think, with cloud seeding, there's still, I don't want to say it's at the infancy stage, but there's still a lot of studying going on with it right now. There's experiments all the time, and so a lot of these issues are being worked out. But sometimes these larger issues with flooding, with hail, those are a little tougher to get through as you're moving forward with this.
One of the questions we got from Drake, he is from League City. He asked, when two storm cells, merge together into one storm, why do they sometimes come out much stronger than an individual two storms that created it?
So that's
the last night.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you have moisture with one and moisture with the other. So you have two moisture beds right here, right? They merge together, and when they do, they're from two different directions. And when you have two winds from two different directions, they have nowhere to go but up. Right. So they go up, and they take all that moisture with them, and then they condenses and forms more cloud cover and a bigger storm. And it a lot of times just will rain itself out right where it is because it can't move either way. Sometimes it will eventually start going with an upper level wind, but that's why it's just, and you see it all the time. And we saw it last night. I thought we might see it today. We had a sea breeze.
Oh, we saw that on the radar. Very clear.
You see that sea breeze coming? Because it's just a matter of lift. And one helps lift the other, and you get that much more moisture in the atmosphere.
And how much moisture in the atmosphere makes a difference as well. We saw the atmosphere worked over really well yesterday. Not as much moisture here, more settled down, to not an opportunity to do half as much storms as we had yesterday.
Correct. But we also had a whole line of lift, coming down from that old front, that remnant front. I know, right? That was a good one.
What's cool about that, you were talking about a small scale, two supercell thunderstorms basically coming together and creating this big rain event. Since it's a hurricane special, we're talking about hurricanes, the Fujiwara effect, when you get two tropical systems, two hurricanes, and they're next to each other, they'll revolve around each other. So it's different than what you see on the small scale. They don't bump into each other, they revolve around each other, but the one that's stronger will eventually weaken and kill off the weaker one, and many times that one becomes a little stronger, but they never merge. And we saw this a few years ago in a hurricane season, they were exact same strength, and all they did in the Atlantic was go around each other because neither one weakened. It's like a boxing match.
It's a fascinating phenomenon. Judge, when you were monitoring from the emergency centers, how early do you start to get notice about storms that you need to be concerned about?
Well, really, as soon as they start coming off the coast of Africa, we start watching them. And frankly, we watch you guys and say, okay, what's this going to do? But then once they come in, I mean, think about Harvey. Harvey just dissipated for all intents and purposes. Everybody relaxed, and then it spun back up again and hit, down near Rockport. And the fact that it hit near Rockport, we're out there monitoring. We're going, well, it didn't hit us. And Jeff Lindner walked in and said, you know what, northwest of here may get a lot of rain, really a lot of rain. And then he came in a few hours later and said, actually it may be us. And so, you start monitoring as soon as there's anything to question. I remember when Hurricane Ike in 2008, Mark Sloan and I were in Washington. And we're sitting at the airport, and he says, I don't have a good feeling about this. I said, about what? Well, there's this storm out in the Atlantic. Well, that became Hurricane Ike. Yep. So days in advance, we start monitoring.
To that line of questioning, so you had Harvey that was a tropical storm, really a tropical depression, the tropical storm on Wednesday morning. Thursday, it was a Category 1. It became a Category 4, 130-mile-an-hour winds, 23 hours later. Had it been going to Galveston, could we have even evacuated Galveston in that amount of time?
No.
That's the scary part.
No, well, let me say, Galveston, yes, maybe. But could we have evacuated the low-lying areas of Brazoria and Harris? Probably not. But remember, Rita taught everybody a good lesson, and that is don't evacuate unless you're in danger of the storm surge. And we were able during Ike to keep people at home so that people in Galveston and the lower parts of Brazoria and Harris could transit through the area. So you sometimes learn by your mistakes, and in this case we did. But you mentioned the category of the storm. That's not what's so important. I mean, what was Hurricane Ike? A
two.
Cat 2?
Yeah.
But it had what?
A storm surge of a 4,
Yeah.
which is why surge finally got taken out of that whole Saffir-Simpson scale.
So we worry on an emergency side. You worry more about this in Harris County anyway, the storm surge than you do the wind speed, because by the time it gets into Harris County, the wind speed's not going to be
as intense.
the killing.
You know,
factor.
that's called the meow, because you know we have a Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, but then you have a meow, which is the maximum envelope of wind. And there are studies that what will be the maximum wind in Dallas if a Category 5, 160 mile an hour hurricane hits Galveston. What will be the meow in Dallas? What will be the meow in Houston? So there are tables for that.
Yeah.
And if a big enough storm hit here, we could certainly see hurricane force winds in Houston pretty easily. And so when you talk about hunkering down,
Right.
we haven't had to hunker down to a 140 mile an hour storm since Carla.
That's probably right.
1961.
Yeah, I was born the year before.
But we have to mention on Harvey, because I said this on the on-air segment. Harvey wasn't a hurricane when it got to us,
Right.
And-
it hovered over Victoria for 2 days.
and then it kind of drifted over our way. So we could have that kind of a storm probably anytime, right?
yeah, I mean, well, this
And
thing
you
in
can't
the
evacuate for those.
so this thing in the Gulf. If you were calling shots on this, what we're seeing in the Gulf, there's nothing from the National Hurricane Center or the National Weather Service right now. So it's got a lot of the Twitterverse talking. It is a bit of a spin. It's going over warm water. What's your alert on this at this given time?
I'd say probably within a day, the professionals at it, the Office of Emergency Management, will be on high alert to monitor, just to see what goes on.
Yeah.
Just to,
I mean, even if it develops, it won't be much. You know, 40 mile an hour winds, maybe
Not to-
3 to 5 inches of rain. I mean, it's not expected to turn into anything big. So there's that too. I guess you consider that, like, not only where is it and when is it, but what is it?
right.
And right now, it's not. Right now, the forecast models have it going well south of where we are.
Oh, yeah, Corpus,
We
sure.
still have the rain that's going on for the next couple of days or so.
But Harvey went well south of us.
It did. It did. This is not
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
This isn't Harvey.
No.
Same church, different pew.
And so,
right.
but people remember from what happened in the past. And so Harvey's the latest memory. So one of the things is trying to get people to understand, no, we're not talking about Harvey here.
But the farther away we get from those storms, the less people remember and the less they're inclined to be acutely wanting to do something about it. You know, for the next time, the Ike Dike, for example, being able to vote for something like that. Hey, we were talking about a lot of things related to the drought, and we've got a question from Todd from Pecan Grove. Asked, the past 2 months have been hot and dry. Just how much less rain than normal is the current status?
Half.
Yeah.
I think that's a short answer,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
I know you've been looking into that.
Yeah, that's about what we've got. In fact, if you guys want to pop the graphic up here, this is what we've seen so far. Here's the thing. As I said when we were in the show, April basically said we're done with spring. We're going to go straight to summertime. So we had the second hottest May on record. We had the hottest June and July on record.
And let me make a point.
Sure.
In January, which counts for this year, Bush Intercontinental had 9 inches of rain.
Right.
I mean, it was sort of a super phenomenal there.
right.
So, but if you subtract 6 or 7 or 8 inches from that 24, it gets you closer to what Hobby and Galveston and College Station have
Well,
been.
I've seen it that
So when you look at Houston Intercontinental and you say, oh, they're only 7.5 inches below normal compared to Hobby 16.5, that's the reason.
Here, so Judge, let me ask you a question then. Given back in 2011, because that's the one I know that you all sitting
Gosh,
at the
that
table
was
here
a
remember.
tough summer.
Oh my gosh. From 2011 to now, there's been an enormous influx of thousands of folks that have moved to the greater Houston area. How much more of a stress does that put on the resources and just the grid, so to speak, but from a community and a county standpoint? What would you look to do if we are sort of going down that path of a 2011 again?
Well, there's no question that it stresses government. But without getting into a long answer, what people don't understand about Houston and Harris County, Houston is less than half of the population of Harris County. The people who live in unincorporated Harris County, the part of Harris County that isn't in any of the 34 cities, is about 2 million people. Dallas County has less than 10,000 in their unincorporated county.
Wow.
County governments don't even have ordinance making power. So you've got all these special districts out there, and they're trying to deal with it and keep up with the growth. The roads are trying to keep up. Everything about it, the water districts, the emergency service districts, it puts a huge stress on. And long term, I'm going to put on my government policy hat here. Long term, the city and county have got to figure out a way to do things together, because you can't have all these people living where there's not even any ordinance making power.
That's a challenge, because politically there's always this little friction.
Oh, huge
between
friction.
City of Houston and Harris County. I know that's shocking, because you've always been an affable, easygoing guy. Nobody would want to not get along with you, but you know, that's always been a little friction point, hasn't it?
It has, and it will continue to be so. And the legislature has made it almost impossible for the city of Houston to annex those areas. And so what do? The Woodlands took a creative approach, and they have a township model, which they now argue regularly over whether or not to incorporate, or whether they keep their township model. But you still got these 2 million people, and most of the people you're talking about that moved into this area have moved into unincorporated Harris County. Something's got to give.
The challenge is continuing. We will watch what's happening with a lot of things, the months and months and months and months of hot weather going forward. And then we also look at the hurricane forecast. Matt from South Montgomery County asked us, how much do you trust NOAA and Colorado State University forecast predictions each year? What are your predictions in the Gulf Coast region? I would like to rephrase that question. It's not like how much do we trust, but how much do we rely on the variations that they put out? I don't think you really trust any. I don't trust anything, but I know that they are climatologists and they look at long-range models, and it helps us get a general sense of what may be out there for us.
Right, but look at NOAA's forecast. I mean, that's your government at work.
Yeah.
With the 14 to 20.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite the.
Pretty broad.
That's a
Quite
pretty
the
good.
range
It's
there.
a pretty good bet.
You can't be wrong.
Right, that's a very good bet right there. Colorado State's, they were the first to get on board. Bill Gray in 1984 started that. And so I've watched them my whole career. And basically if they said it was going to be busy, it was busy. If they said it wasn't going to be busy, it wasn't. So it wasn't so much about the number of 18, 8, and 4, but was it just going to be a busier than normal season? And I would say they're about 80% right on that, because they've had busts.
Right.
And even Phil, who now runs at Colorado State, Phil Klotzbach, said, and he said, if this is a bust this year, it's because of the European heat wave and all this warm, hot, dry weather coming over the Atlantic, which tells me he's already thinking, this might be a bust this year.
Back this off a bit this year.
But I like it as guy. But listen, the guy puts. I will tell you this: Gary Leezak has the Leezak recurring cycle. He's a meteorologist up in Kansas City.
Yeah.
He's retiring this year. He's been doing this for 40 years, but he came up with this method of basically looking 6 months before to predict 6 months out. In other words, if you had a lot of low pressure systems in March, then you would get a lot of low pressure systems in September that could become storms. Right. And so he said it at the American Meteorological Society conference. He said, I know everybody's predicting this huge season. I'm predicting 4. So it'll be interesting to see if he's right, because he's getting out of the business to go with his own company, his own forecasting company. But he does pretty good with predictions. And so maybe we need to look at the past to predict the future.
What we always try to say also is it only takes one. You always want to prepare for the one. Right. And so it doesn't matter if it's a busy year.
That wasn't the question.
Yes, they're all over the Atlantic. Be ready for the one. 1992, Hurricane Andrew, Category 5 hit Miami. 4 storms that year. Right. 4. And
well,
there's
was
Cam Burrell.
7, right?
That's my only Category 5 I've been involved with. We were on the air when the tower got blown down at our television station. So it's
and you were a sports guy.
I was an anchor then. I was transitioning. That's how I became an anchor. I transitioned from sports to news on that night. Everybody was out of town. They said, "You're the sports director. Can you do it? Do it." So they said, "You're good. Let's do it." So that's why I stuck. So I managed to.
But you're right. I mean, Alicia was one of 7, 4, maybe 4 storms that year in '83, and Alicia got us. And people forgot that Edouard in 2008 hit us before Ike. But the big bear comes to town, and you forget about the
one
little
everyone remembers, right?
Yeah.
Got another question here. Matt Low ask in the comment section on click2houston.com. If storms are getting stronger, what can residents do to better prepare for these storms? And what can government do better to prepare?
Well, we're building up. If you go to Bolivar, everything's 20 feet high.
Yeah.
Well,
You know, so we're building up and we're building stronger, but we're still building out of wood. Right? I mean, not to be cynical, my house is built out of wood. Most houses are built out of wood. And everything in nature is round. The solar system is round, our heads are round, our eyes are round. Trees are round, everything is round, and we build squares out of wood. So,
thought about that, had you?
yeah. Have you ever seen a square airplane wing? No. Wind works with obelisks, with igloos, with anything round. It doesn't work with
Not
squares.
pleasing to the eye, though, Frank.
Oh, and it's hard to hang pictures on round. Let's face
I
it.
do have to weigh in with one kind of serious comment. Frank mentioned winds earlier. A lot of these houses that are being built out on the bald prairie, are the roof tie-downs really made to handle any wind? I don't think so in many cases. So we could someday see a situation, not a great loss of life, but you could see a lot of property damage from wind, like in Katy. I don't want the people in Katy to go panic, but you know, there are subdivisions that those houses aren't engineered to handle the wind over a certain thing. But you mentioned Bolivar. I have to say this. We all remember the photo of Bolivar after Ike. One green house.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's built there again. Really? I mean,
That was Warren Adams' house.
kind of going,
Yeah.
hit me.
Yeah,
I mean,
and he
you know,
built that house after Rita rebuilt it. And he told his contractor, I want this house to withstand a Category 5 hurricane. And it did. There was the only one. Yeah, and it's like that Twilight Zone where the guy goes into the vault to escape the nuclear war, and then he comes out and he's the only one left. Yeah. And then he drops his eyeglasses. Remember that one? Yep. So if you're the only one there and your infrastructure's gone and your police and your fire and your government and all your neighbors are gone, and yeah, you built great, but did everybody else? Yeah. We have to look at the community. You can't just be, one man as an island.
Yeah, easier said than done, right? I have an opportunity. You have an opportunity. Contest page at click2houston.com. You can enter to win a generator, and you can also sign up for a live chat with one of our meteorologists. And we talked about this on the live program. Who would not want to have some quality time with Anthony Yanez or Justin Stapleton or Frank Billings?
Yeah.
You can do that. Please go do that. You laugh, but it's a great opportunity. Go ahead and do that. Hey, Kenneth from Katy asks, why does the rain nearly always dissipate before it reaches my area?
Well, I've never heard that question before.
Oh my gosh.
We've had that a lot. Our radar shows some of it as well.
Pearland happened last night.
Yeah.
I mean, you just saw it split.
Right.
And Galveston, too. I see it all the time. Cypress gets it. Pearland gets it. Tomball gets it. I mean, everybody gets it.
I think, Anthony, you had a really good explanation of this the other day when you were talking about the fact that the sea breeze was not strong enough to pull everything north of I-10. It's about where it usually gets, and everything just kind of falls apart. And that high was too far away, so it couldn't grab any of those and pull them a little further inland.
Yeah.
That's kind of the explanation I've seen the last couple of weeks.
And I'll tell you, the last time I've heard comments like this, back in 2011, when you get a drought and you have these hit and miss storms that start to develop after the drought in 2011, and it's like, why are these storms missing my area? And they've actually done studies, and they've averaged it all out, and they found that, you know what, everybody gets their turns. But when you're desperately needing rain, you really notice, and you're looking at Frank's radar app in the afternoon, and you're like, wait, I'm in Katy. Why is Houston, why is Sugar Land getting this rain, why is Cypress not getting this rain, why is Jersey Village not? And you notice the discrepancies, but when you look at the end of the year, it actually really does average out.
Yes, it is. It's like anything else.
It's not when you garden.
During wedding season. Why is everybody getting married but me? They're focused on a certain thing, when you're not the one that's getting it. You're absolutely right.
That drier air in the lower levels of the atmosphere sometimes do a good job of eating up that stuff that's falling down. Radar
Yes, and we've had, I think we've dealt with more dust this summer than in the past. Usually we're pretty dry in July anyway, and we were certainly hot and dry this time, and so that's always going to make it harder especially in some areas, to get that rain in there. But Anthony's right about the sea breeze. It tends to kind of wither as it moves past town. Gets to about Houston, but like last night, that was all coming from the north, and it still got to
completely
Pearland.
different thing.
Totally different dynamics, right?
And you were mentioning with the high pressure area, that high has been over our northwestern areas, really from Houston, Katy, Cypress, all the way out to College Station. So those areas have been really tough to get rain this summer. And so when you get the sea breeze, you get a storm like last night, it has a hard time falling in those areas. Last night, thankfully, Cypress, Jersey Village, Katy did get 2 to 3 to 4 inches of rain, and you saw the difference there.
But came with the damage too. It's always a price to pay, it seems like.
So we had a question from one of our viewers asking, is the way that our coast is configured make it more difficult or easier for tropical storms to impact us?
You know what, that's a chicken or the egg question. Maybe our coast is shaped the way it is because of thousands of years of hurricanes.
Yeah.
Same along the eastern seaboard. I mean, you know, how did it get to be like that in the first place? You kind of wonder. Concave coasts, hurricanes don't generally like concave coasts, and everything tries to turn to the northeast because of the way the earth spins. So it tries to, and you see these storms all turning northeast. So a lot of times by the time it finally gets across the whole Gulf of Mexico, it starts to turn northeast. I mean, that's what Ike did, and that's what a lot of them do. But does it help? Doesn't hurt.
Doesn't hurt. Hey, this has been fun. This is a conversation we normally have, except the Judge is not here. But
Yeah, it's great having you.
It's great seeing you.
Yes, that was fun.